Welcome to Banyan Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyan.com. Since 1970, Banyan Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyan.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy.
Hello and welcome. My name is Jacob Steele, the events manager for Banyan Books. Today we're delighted to be hosting Mark Nepo in conversation with Joel Fotinos about Mark Nepo's new book, You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that although we have participants joining us from around the world, the physical location of Banyan Books is on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. If you enjoyed today's event, we invite you to donate to Banyan Books to help support these programs to be free and accessible for all. There's a PayPal donation link in the video description below. So now for introductions. Mark Nepo, I have to say, Mark Nepo is one of my favorite of all presenters I've ever known. I love this guy so much. But anyways, that's just me. I'm sure that's all of you too. Mark Nepo is a beloved poet and philosopher who has been teaching poetry and spirituality for over 50 years. He's a #1 New York Times bestseller. The Book of Awakening has touched the hearts of millions worldwide. With 25 books and over a dozen audio projects, his work is available in more than 20 languages. Recognized as one of the 100 most spiritually influential living people by Watkins and part of Oprah's Super Soul 100, Mark's writing and teaching centers on inner transformation and deep relationships. You can learn more about his work at marknepo.com. In Mark Nepo's new book, You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship, Mark Nepo turns his attention to the value of community, offering an insightful and inspiring take on our shared human experience. Mark will be joined today with Joel Fotinos, another one of my faves. Joel Fotinos is the founder and editorial director of St. Martin's Essentials and former VP of the Tarcher Perigee imprint at Penguin Random House. He's the author of such books as The Prosperity Principles, published in over 14 languages, and was named Science of Mind Spiritual Hero of the Year. And you can find out more about him at joelfotinos.com. Without further ado, please welcome Mark Nepo and Joel Fotinos.
Hey, thank you, Jacob.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Joel. It's wonderful to be together, as always, and wonderful to be with all of you folks.
It's so great to be here with you, and I want to begin by thanking Banyan Books for setting this up. They're just amazing, and these online events that they do are just transformational. So lots of kudos to them. We're in conversation, and so the best conversations begin with questions, I guess. But before we get into a question, I just wanted to give you and everybody listening here, and thanks to everybody for showing up today or who watches this, just some nice news, Mark, which you don't even know, which is that You Don't Have to Do It Alone, which just came out, just went into a second printing already.
Oh, wonderful. Thank
which
you.
means people are loving it and the response to it is incredible. Also, just FYI, your previous book, which came out about a year ago, is just now going into a fourth printing, which is pretty amazing. And the first book you and I did together, The Book of Soul, just now is going into a 6th printing.
Oh my goodness.
So congratulations. I thought that would be a fun way to start this, because your work is really touching people, and each book just has such a great quality to it that I think really people really respond to. You're also incredibly prolific. So I kind of wanted to begin in the macro sense and ask you this question, which is, what is your process? What is your daily process
Yeah,
for writing books? Or
sure.
for anything?
It's really more of I feel like an inner explorer. I'm more discovering, retrieving, and then putting things together as they tell me. Early on, like many writers and artists, I was taught when I was younger, be on the look for good material. Well, then, as you know, Joel, in my 30s, I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma. Well, on the other side of that, I was gifted with the lens of the miraculous. That is, everything's miraculous if we open ourselves and are present enough to bear witness to it. So, writer's block is not that I can't find something, it's that my window is either filtered or dirty or covered, or I need to open up and be present enough to recognize the miracle that's already here. And so I don't really look, sure, I have, as you and I've talked so often, I have, quote, ideas, but they're just catch basins for when it gets real. So I'm always on the look, and I will take down fragments and images and be in conversation with life and others, and really just follow my heart's Geiger counter. And then I'll just save all these almost like little parts of a mosaic. And then I'll see every once in a while, well, how do they want to go together? What are they telling me? And then that starts to shape a book. And so it's really, and then the other thing is that I write about what I need to learn. I don't write to share what I know. If I did that, I would have written very little. So there's a lot I don't know, and there's a lot to, so it's really staying in that stream. And I've discovered over time that I think the introspective process and the creative process are really very much the same. I just happen to write it down.
Right. Well, that makes it sound so simple. Write it down poetically and beautifully and inspire millions. I will say, a peek behind the curtain, you are the most organized author I think I have ever worked with in decades of publishing. You're so, I bet your computer, I just picture, when you say that you write and they just kind of go to landing pages, you must have like lots of files on your computer.
Well, I do. Actually, my desktop is like a visual file cabinet. I have folders for many different books and things, so I can go right into them as because the creative stream and the intuitive stream is very fluid and not organized at all. But then when it comes through me, then I organize it, and so I can return to it and shape it as it comes. I'm actually, I am a little OCD, so I've learned to make good use of it through the years.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's awesome. You could teach a class on that. So going from kind of the macro of this to this particular book. So, I have my thoughts about this, but what would you say is the origin of this book, and how did it develop?
Yeah, well, I've always wanted to write a book about spirit and friendship, and friendship is so important to me, and friends have been so integral in saving my life more than once, in literal ways and in emotional ways, and so I've always wanted, so I really wanted to look at what is how to praise this miracle of friendship. And like you said, behind the curtain, how to look, how does it work? How does it work? There are, just like there are weather principles, there are principles. There are, kind of the physics of friendship. How does it work? how as an art form, how do we get better at it? What happens when it doesn't work? So that we can all, not only that this book, I wanted it to praise friendship, but I wanted it to be a tool to help us all be better friends. And also, I think, Joel, the thing that is obviously when we talk about friends, the first thing that comes up is us and each other. But it's also a gateway to how do we befriend life?
Mm.
How do we befriend nature? How do we befriend the invisible mystery of things? That because there's a different quality. I can understand life. That's not the same thing as befriending life, because if I befriend you, I act differently than if I understand you. So how do
Mm.
we cultivate these friendships and practice them really everywhere?
Well, not I don't have the whole book memorized, but on page 143, you do say this. You say, earlier I mentioned that the word friendship means at its root, place of high safety. And I thought that, in a sense, that's one of the ways that you could sum up this book, is that you describe how friendship really is the safe place. And you begin the book, by the way, also very similarly. You say, after a lifetime of trying to be a good friend, I wrote this book to affirm the spirit of friendship, to praise what it takes to love another well, to better understand the physics of friendship, and to show that despite what we've been taught, you don't have to do it alone. And it's so interesting, too, because we live in a society that really loves the person who does it alone. And
Well,
yet you talk about the safety net of doing it in communication with others.
yeah, and I think that that there's like every culture, just like every personality has its strengths and its weaknesses or shadow point. Well, so do cultures. And one of the gifts of the Western culture is the very deep development of a self. However, the shadow of that is the modern psychological disease of narcissism,
Mm.
and which is more widespread in America than anywhere else in the world. And so there is this myth that yes, that it's noble to be independent, to be self-reliant. Well, having almost died from cancer and been knocked around by this miracle of life, we are interdependent. It is actually another psychological disease to think we can do it alone,
Mm.
because great love and great suffering stop us and say, no, no, you can't. And so there's this great paradox. No one can live your life for you. No one can see what you see or feel what you feel, and no one can do it alone. It's impossible.
Yeah, you even use the phrase "the invisible cord," I think, in the book
Yeah,
at
there's
one
this
point.
this tie, this tug. And I think this is what all the mystical traditions speak about, that when our heart is fully open, we feel this tug, this connection to all of life. And when I was a boy, I'm sure you recognize this. That tug, I call it the sweet ache of being alive.
Mm.
And when I was a kid, I remember, teachers, elementary school teachers, thinking I was sad. And I didn't feel sad. Well, I came later to realize in life, I wasn't feeling sadness. I was feeling depth.
Wow.
And
Oh, right. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so it turns out that the sweet ache of being alive, when I feel the connection to everything, that's actually my oldest friend. It's never let me down. I was taught to, oh, get rid of that sadness. No, it's actually a reminder that we're here and we're connected to everything, and we can feel it. That's how we can feel the tug of strangers, or the suffering of people we don't even know halfway around the world. And so it's not, we tend in our culture to pathologize everything that makes us uncomfortable. No, it's the sweet tug of being alive, the sweet ache
Wow.
of being here.
Yeah. That was my first hair-raising moment of this conversation. I'm sure, because I do recognize that, and that's so well put. I want to remind people, if they have questions, they can put them in the comments, and I'll do my best to include them in this conversation. We won't be able to get to everybody, but Mark, I'm looking at page 29. You mentioned here in this book about the Spanish teacher, and I'm not going to try to say his name, who extended the Buddhist notion of Sangha, which is Sanskrit for a circle of souls committed to each other, to Sangama, which means a small circle of friends who go through a journey or pilgrimage together. I'd love for you to talk about that more, and also talk about, your Sangamas, like your men's group.
Yeah. So the Spanish teacher is Ramon Panicar. And I love what he does there, because it is that we actually, I talk in the book about the journey of seeking truth together is one of the first kind of vows of friendship. And so this ties with what we were just talking about a little bit, in the sense that, we are so unfamiliar with depth that, if I see my wife is upset or something, the first thing I do is go, "What's wrong?" Instead of saying, "What are you seeing or feeling? What is your heart opening to that
Right.
I haven't learned yet, that you can talk about?" It may be that something's wrong, but to presume something's wrong because we're feeling depth is another way that we pathologize everything, and it closes us off to what we can learn from each other. So that gets back to the Sangama, that is a circle of true friends, is how do we simply be on a journey where we can take notes, compare notes on what it is to be here, honestly and openly, not having to maintain any masks or pretenses, because the truth is, no one knows how to do this. For all the things that have been written, no one knows how to do this. And so I think the first kind of opening of friendship is to say, "I don't know." "Oh, I don't know either." Now we can walk together. And so, I am part of a wonderful men's group, 7 of us who have been meeting for 18, 19 years now. And we just started one day because one of our spouses was in a women's group. And so 2 of us were sitting having a beer in summer on my deck, and we're kind of staring out in the backyard going, "Gee, wish we could have a group like that." And all of a sudden we looked at each other and said, "Wait a minute, we can do this." And in 10 minutes, we identified the other 5 invitees. And then we started meeting once a month in everybody's living room. And being and I was not, there's no facilitator, it's not, but I was wondering, like, well, how are we going to do this? Do we need to have ground rule? Well, my God, Joel, it was so natural. As soon as we were together, it was everybody, we just listened and shared whatever we had to share, as long as anybody needed, and nobody gave advice unless it was asked for, and we just held each other. And of course, mysteriously and not surprisingly, the deeper we shared, the more everybody's story was everybody's journey. And maybe the details may be different, but we're really learning from each other. Like, whoever was speaking was sharing wisdom by being authentic and honest. And and there was one point in our journey I'll share. So we met for like the first 7, 8 years, we were meeting once a month, and we started to have an annual retreat for a few days every year. But one of our dear friends, our elder in the group, Don, he threw out his back one time, and we all checked in, called and everything. But the next time, when he was well enough and he was back in the group, he said with very great vulnerability, because, "Gee," a tremble in his voice, he said, "I know you guys love me, but why didn't any of you guys come over?" And we were all stunned, like, why didn't we? Like, oh my God. And his vulnerability, and I share this story because it's a great example of honesty and vulnerability in friendship. His vulnerability to ask that question took us to another level. After that day, we weren't just meeting once a month to share our lives, we were in each other's lives.
Mm,
That changed everything.
yeah. That was an invitation, really, to take it to another level.
And it's all, as I share that story because even in our friendships, or if we want friendships and we feel like it's hard, well, it means we do have to take a risk. You know, if we're lonely, we need to not read the book at home alone in our study. We need to go read in a cafe, even if you don't talk to anybody, be around other people.
Mm-hmm.
We need to say hello. We need, not that every person we meet is going to become our long lost soul person. And somewhat situations may be awkward or whatever, but we're in life. And so the first way to befriend ourselves is to extend the room of our solitude out
Extend
into
the room of our solitude.
out
There we go.
out into the world.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that I belong to some groups as well, including a men's group, and including artist way groups that I facilitate, which we get incredibly close because of what you just said. And I hadn't put my finger on it, but we're not just, I forget now how beautifully you said it, something about we're not just, seeing each other, but now we're in each other's lives.
We're in each other's lives.
Yeah, and I think it's so great. I was thinking when I was kind of preparing for this, I have to keep holding up. I have the preview and then the real copy, which is prettier. But I was thinking as I was getting ready for today that this is a great book that people might want to invite one or two friends or three or four friends together and just begin once a week or once a month, whatever feels right. The book is made up of short chapters. There's sections, and within each section are short chapters. And you can do one chapter a week or one section a week, whatever pace. But it really does invite conversation, what you're saying here. And what a great way to talk about the power of friendship by being friendship in action using a book like this.
Thank you. And also, that's why as many of you know from my other books, that I always have journal questions and conversation questions at the end of each chapter as a way to invite you to personalize whatever the topics are, whatever we're looking at. Where does it live in your life and how does it speak to you?
Now, somebody wrote in the comments, they asked, how did you choose the men to invite to your group? That's a good kind of larger question. If somebody wanted to take a book like this and really come together as a group, who do you choose?
Well, I would say, we were very heart intuitive. I think we just thought of the people, and I would frame it. I think a good guide would be the definition of friendship. Like, is this a person that you would like to explore the depths of life with, that you would feel safe with, and that you respect and admire?
Yeah.
And sure, there are actually, we have so many different personalities, but if someone is truly present and listens well to each other, then don't hesitate and ask and go. I think that we don't have to have too many preferences if we look with our heart. Is this a place of high, with these people in the circle, will this be a place of high safety?
Yeah. And maybe agree on a few things as well, like confidentiality.
Well, confidentiality and like some of the ground rules that I do in my teaching circles too is that no giving of advice. No, we're not fixing each other. We're here to listen and bear witness to each other. We don't offer feedback unless someone asks for it.
Right.
And then that all becomes very natural once you're together.
Actually, now that I think about it, I'm looking over your shoulder. Your right shoulder is this book, and if it's a group of people coming together with kind of a hard time, maybe they're going through transitions or challenges. This book, I should have held it up, Falling Down and Getting Up, Discovering Your Inner Resilience and Strength. That might also be another good book for people to study. It's not even study together. It's really just let the book spark that conversation and bond.
Well, I think
with each
that, my feeling about my own work is that it's a window to the work, not my work, but the work of being alive, the work of being loving, the work of being real, the work of compassion. And so it's just one of many doorways to where that all lives in you and in your relationships. And so, yes, if these books can be a opening, a spark to bringing that alive, I couldn't be happier.
What a great thing. So I encourage everyone listening to consider that if they want to add kind of more closeness in their relationships. Now, on page 33, you use a phrase, and I wanted to ask you what you meant by it. Right in the middle of the page, you say, 40 years ago, when Robert first let me into his life, comma, all the way in, comma, we took this walk that turned into a hike, etc. That phrase, all the way in, what did you mean by that?
Well, I mean that at what level, Cicero said a friend is a second self. And I didn't talk to Cicero, I don't know what he meant, but what it says to me, is, that it's actually, when I say that being with you is like being by myself, that's actually a compliment.
Mm.
That's actually a compliment because there's no masks, there's no walls, there's nothing that's hidden. There's different, I can choose to share different things at different times, but I don't have to hide anything. And so what I mean by all the way in is like saying, yeah, to be true friends together, we want to walk in our full humanity together. And that means that place of high safety, you will accept my frailties, my fears, the ways I fall down. When I'm not a good friend, if I admit it, we can get through it. So it's how do we really, we don't have very many places where we can be completely who we are, and yet all the spiritual traditions, the journey of individuation is to be who we are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
To be who we are everywhere. And a true friend is a space, that friendship all the way in is a space where, I can call you up and say, boy, I'm afraid today and I just can't kick it. I know better. There doesn't seem to be a reason for it, but can you help me today? That's all the way in.
Yeah.
That's all the way in.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, near that section on page 35 is you begin that section by saying, in Marge Piercy's poem, The Friend, the sure one says, cut off your hands. They are always poking at things. And I remember first reading that back when, and I thought, wow, that's so interesting. And then I read your explanation of it, and it's so interesting. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
So Marge Piercy has this poem, obviously, called The Friend, and it's a very stark, powerful, to get our attention, extreme image of these two people, and the voices basically say, one person says, I love you, and the other person says, oh, that's nice, I like to be loved. And then the first person says, oh, I really love you. And then the second person says, well, if you love me, you'd cut off your hands. And then the first person continues to gush, and the second person says, well, oh, have you cut off your hands yet? And you go, whoa, that's not friendship, that's abuse. So she's portraying something very extreme. And as I reflected on that, so that's in the extreme to get our attention. But when you bring that back into the spectrum of of possibility. If someone loves you, they don't ask you to be other than who you are. So you can replace the question. So you could say, oh, I love you. And the other person says, oh, well, if you really love me, you don't have to go see those friends tonight. Why don't you stay home with me? Or if you really love me, you won't do A, B, or C. Or, and so a lot, the ask is different. It's not as, when we see it with cut off your hands, it's clear. No, nobody who loves you would ask you to do that. But when we back it off, then it gets muddy. And we have to say, one of the things I've learned over time too, through, many relationships is if someone loves you, they want you to grow, not stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
And we often in our culture mistake consistency for reliability. Like, I don't need to stay the same for you to count on me. I have room to grow, and that has nothing to do with whether I'll show up for you. But we somehow associate, well, you're steady and you never change and you're reliable. I can count on that. No, that's not real reliability. So how do we give each other the room, true friend? And this is, I think, the work of true intimacy is, my wife Susan and I are married 28 years. And I know her so well I could finish her sentences, and I don't. but not for that, the obvious reason, but because I believe that we're both growing, changing spirits and bodies in a life. So after all this time, I want to say, who are you today? I know you felt this way and that way, but do you still feel that way? What do you think now? What has changed? Where's your growing? What do you need to grow? And so if we and then our journey is, how do we stay in the dance of intimacy, is supporting each other to grow while dancing with the changes that growth creates. So it's a little more of a dance as opposed to being fixed.
What you were just saying reminds me of the quote that you put right here on page 152 from Elizabeth Bowley. The most beautiful discovery true friends make is that they can grow separately without growing apart. Yes,
I love that quote.
It's beautiful.
I love that quote, that we can grow. And I think that's that's also part of the place of high safety, is I can come to you in a friendship or a marriage or whatever it might be and say, something's shifting in me. And it's part of the conversation. If it's not part of the conversation, then it becomes a threat to the relationship. But if the relationship is big enough to hold that inquiry, it's exciting, and we share and we say, something's shifting in me, I'm not sure what it is. Mm-hmm. Then I can say, well, how can I help you explore that? Do you need to have some time alone? Do you need to go study with someone? What do you need?
Right.
And keep sharing what you find. So I think this is, one of the big differences about relationship is that relationship is truly a nest we return to. It's not a thing we mirror or go to the same place together, but in order for you to be you and me to be me, I need to live and go and do what I need to do to be fully here. And then we come back to the nest and share it.
You mentioned an interesting concept that really ties into this, because you're talking about being so open and available to people and letting them, a friend, a spouse who should be a friend, to be open for them to do their journey, and we get to witness it, help it, and vice versa. But on page 133, that section called Giving of Yourself, you talk about the difference between giving of yourself versus giving yourself away. Because I think that's, our motivation kind of comes into this. Why are we doing this? Do we want to be liked? I mean, I'm an old people pleaser, and the capital G good, capital B boy, good boy. So, early in my life, that was always my motivation. Underneath things is, for that. So I would give everything away because my motivation
Sure.
wasn't clear or clean.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all thank you for sharing that, because we all struggle with that at some point in our lives. And I think what I've learned is that, giving ourselves away is always in service, that the people pleasing, uh, is all in service, that we are going to get our worth from somewhere other than inside ourselves.
Mm.
So then it's like, okay, what's the secret code? What do I have to do and for whom that will give me my worth? And then if I find it, how do I sustain it? And of course, that's just exhausting and it doesn't work.
Right.
So that's when we're giving ourselves away, because we're exchanging something that is sacred in here on the hope and guess that someone's external approval will give us worth. And so giving of ourselves is a different paradox, a different mysterious thing. That is, there's a great quote by Buddha. I can't remember if I use it in this book or in the last book, that's attributed to Buddha, that you can light 1,000 candles with one candle, and the first candle will never be diminished. And so there is this, that when we truly give of our heart and our soul, we grow for it. Not because of how you will respond to what I give, but for what will be unearthed in me about my true nature. Every time I give, I will learn more about my true nature and my place in the universe, because it's not by accident that kindness and kinship have the same root. So every time we're kind, we deepen our kinship with all things. And that's where the mystery of give, there's these times, not every time, there are times when we have to honor limitations and say, I'm exhausted, I can't give anymore, and we have to have boundaries. But there are other times in my life where I have felt I have no more to give, just when somebody needs something, truly needs something. And I have found a way to give more. And mysteriously, I've always grown for it. Now, that's not to say there are other times we do need to set boundaries, but the reward comes from exercising the heart. We are more thoroughly here, and the worth comes from deepening our connection to life itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not out here.
Right.
So often the giving away is looking for that approval and recognition. And this is why accomplishment or achievement, it can be a wonderful thing, but it's not going to bestow worth on our soul.
Yeah.
And so this opens up the friendship with soul, the friendship with life itself.
Right. That's where the soul part of the friendship comes in. Switching gears for a second, I was struck by how many stories, rereading it, so many of the stories in here are of people who meet each other, have a kind of an instant connection, and then either never see each other again but remain lifelong friends, or they see each other 40 years down the road, and they remain lifelong friends. And it reminds me of that great line in Illusions by Richard Bach, where he says something like, your true friends will know more about you in the first minute than other people will, in years. But so two parts to that. One is, what is it that brings that kind of instant connection? That's A. And B is the other part of my brain, maybe the doubting part said, isn't it easier maybe to be friends long distance with somebody when you know, instead of sharing a house or whatever with them and seeing that they don't
Sure,
put
sure.
things
Well, I
away or
think that's
whatever.
true.
But anyway,
So
I want to.
yeah, I think that in the first thing, I think it is a mystery. We talk about love at first sight, and and I'm sure it can happen, but I understand it more deeply as love at first true seeing. At first true seeing, and this has to do with all the way in, and so I could work at a place and have a pleasant say hello to someone every day for 10 years, and then one day when I'm broken open and she has just experienced, not knowing, I don't know, but say the loss of her father, and now we're open in a different way and we say hello, and all of a sudden I go, oh, it's you. I didn't realize it's you after all this time. Oh, it's so much more. And I think we're all, strangers are friends in disguise, and so we're always, when we can be, I think these moments, these synaptic moments of first true seeing, are when we are our masks are down, our defenses are down, and there's nothing between our soul and the souls of those around us. We truly see each other, and a spark is made, a connection is made below words. And then the rest of us, we may never see them again. We may see them every day. And so there are, like I'm thinking in the book, I told, of course, the story of Li Po, the Chinese poet, and his friend So Kin, who they hadn't seen. That's what you're saying. There was an example. They hadn't seen each other most of their lives, but they were still deeply connected. So that some of that, what is that? So some of that could be that they were able to make the most of what they had, and the other could be that they might have made some ideal of themselves that they were befriending and never having the chance to know each other. But I agree, there is a whole nother, when we're in it every day, this is the true messy magnificent work of being human, of true intimacy, is messy, is where'd you put the colander?
Well, you tell the very messy story of Van Gogh and who was the painter friend of his?
Gauguin.
Gauguin, yes. That was when they finally lived together. I think you said for 9 months. How messy
Yes.
that got. So messy that Gauguin had to leave.
Yeah. So, Van Gogh, they really connected on the deepest soul level, artist level, and they went to live together. And, Van Gogh was so obsessed and off kilter, that, he was unstable, and Gauguin was so self-centered, that, they didn't really listen to each other. They were there together, but they were like two small tornadoes in a small boarding house. And so they bumped into each other. And, at one point, they erupted, and Gauguin tells the story that, Van Gogh went at Gauguin in kind of a scuffle. And so Gauguin was frightened and left and didn't return, and, said that he was afraid if he returned, he might have choked Van Gogh. But then, so he left, but he never really, in terms of not being a good friend, he knew that Van Gogh was struggling, and he never really stayed in touch with him. He returned it to find, it was after he had cut off his ear, and tragically, of course, his death. So, there are all these amazing examples, and yet there's this other amazing example, which I refer in the book, of friendship between Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace.
Right.
Now, Darwin, as we know, is the great discoverer of the theory of the species and survival of the fittest. Well, Alfred Wallace was discovering a similar set of principles, but he was doing his work with animals in South America. And they started to correspond with each other, and they shared their work. They learned from each other. And finally, it came to a point when they were going to bring this work to the world, And Alfred Wallace said to Darwin, take my work and use it because you're in a better place to advance what we've discovered than me. You're more respected and well known in the scientific community. Imagine.
Yeah.
So, and Darwin did. And later on, when Wallace was older, he didn't have a pension, and the opposite of Gauguin with Van Gogh, Darwin went out of his way to make sure he went to all the bureaucrats and authorities in the scientific community in London, and he ensured that Wallace had a pension and was taken care of for the rest of his life. What a beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah,
So
that's. Go ahead.
Well, so our question is, when we take those examples, the reason I share them is, okay, how, and I don't necessarily know the answer, but we've got to figure out, how can I become like Charles Darwin as a friend and not like Gauguin?
Right.
Where does that, how do we, we're going to reach that point somewhere in our friendships. And and that's the whole point of the book. That's the whole point of our ongoing conversation about the practice of friendship, because I don't want to, when it shows up like that, I don't want to be Gauguin. I want to be more like Darwin,
Right.
taking care of his friend.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you on that. Let me get to some quick questions I canvassed some people and said, if you could ask Mark Nepo something about friendship, what would you ask? And you actually cover, I picked the ones that obviously tie into the book, but really hit people where they're at. One was, speaking of that quote about, letting people set their own journeys, somebody asked, how do we remain friends with people who have other political or religious views? Right now, that's so polarizing.
Well, so let me, and of course, I don't know, but let me speak to it, because I struggle with it too. And I think this gets back to, first off, when we talk about different political stances, let's back up and say they are all conclusions and judgments. So that, even outside the political realm, that shuts down friendship. We need to back up and ask for questions and stories. So I don't want to know your political conclusion. Say you're on one side of the abortion issue and I'm on the other. I need to inquire. I want to inquire. I don't want, with no agenda. I'm not trying to change you. I want to ask you, what, I can see this is so important to you. Tell me the story. Like, what happened that this was so important? What made you feel so strongly about this? So I can literally learn more about you. This is more like redoing the root work of friendship. Often we ask stories or we do these things as tactics, like, oh, then maybe I can get in and change your mind. No, forget any of that. What made you, and I think a great question to start with anyone, especially kids, is I really have come to like to ask this question of someone: what's it like to be you? Tell me, what's it like to be?
That's a great question. Yeah.
What's it like to be you? Or what's it like to be you right now? You're in the middle of this problem or this struggle. What's it like to be you right now? And so to invite stories, and I do my own practices whenever I feel strongly about something, before I speak it as a belief or an opinion, I reflect, I try to turn it into a question and reflect on it.
Yeah, that's so much less charged. Then it becomes, as we said earlier in the conversation, an invitation rather than, a defense offense.
Well, even in a relationship where, let's say, you hurt me and I feel hurt, and rather than come back in my hurt and say, you're mean, I want to reflect first and ask the question, was Joel mean? What does that really what's going on there before I come out with a judgment. Explore the question. And so I think that, the stories and the questions help us create deeper bonds where true conversation can happen.
Yeah.
Because at this level, you can't have true conversation the way things are when all we do is put out judgments and conclusions.
Yeah. I feel that social media has really, changed that as well, because we're not having conversations, we're texting back and forth, and that can't lead us to a deeper soul connection.
I
It just
agree.
becomes a way to bumper sticker your thoughts. So just watching the time here, some kind of quick questions maybe, and this ties into some of the questions that people have been asking. Somebody said, what would be a first step or steps to become a better friend now? Like right now, today, what could somebody do to be a better friend?
Well, I think one thing that I've learned is to ask what is needed, because of other people. Even as simple about like I've learned that we all do this. We all inadvertently love in the way we'd like to be loved, but that's not always what's needed.
Right.
So I've learned this, when a former father-in-law in a previous marriage, and his sister, he was a long-term farmer, lifelong farmer, taciturn, typical, quiet. And but when his sister was dying, he became very vocal and insistent that we have a schedule so that she would not be left alone 24/7. And something in my heart said, "Oh, now I know what you want when it's your turn." But no one asked her, his sister, what she might have said, leave me alone. I want some space. So it really taught me, our love and compassion, we automatically say, if I were in that situation, I would want this, I'll give that to you. But the first thing is to ask, what do you need?
Yeah.
And I think also truly listening, truly giving space to people to, by listening, we always underestimate our presence with others. And so when we truly listen, we give people the space to discover what they didn't know they know. So they have room to think and feel out loud.
Yeah.
So I think those two things are very helpful.
Yeah, I do too. What if a friend betrays or hurts you? What should you do?
Well, and of course, let's take the word should out of it. But I think when we're betrayed, and these are archetypal things, all of us will be betrayed at some point, or feel mistrusted, or something has gone wrong. Well, I think the first thing we have to do is speak the truth of our betrayal, not just for them, but for us, to speak the truth of what has happened and where that leaves us. Because until you acknowledge that the vase has broken on the floor, you can't begin to pick up the pieces or see if it is put back together or you need to get a new vase. You can't, in denying it, nothing happens. So the first thing is to honor the truth of what you've experienced. And the second is, I think, to voice that to the hurtful party, to see what we can learn. I may bring that hurt to you, and depending on how you respond, if you respond like, "Oh, that hurt you, huh? You're still well, then I know this is not a relationship that can continue." But if you truly say, "Oh my God, I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. I don't know how that happened. I don't want it to happen again." Well, then there's a chance we could become even closer.
Right.
But none of that's possible unless I say, this is what hurt and this is what broke.
Yeah.
And I feel like you did it.
Yeah. That's hard to be vulnerable. Also, again, in our society now, what most people do is they go to Facebook or something and say, so and so did this to me, and and kind of air it to everybody and become victimized by somebody else, rather than being vulnerable and going directly to that person and saying, Mark, when you said this, it really, or when you did this, it really hurt me in this way or something.
Well, I think the thing is that when we're vulnerable, it's actually a position of strength, because the fact that we will feel things when we're vulnerable, we're going to feel things anyway. If we're not vulnerable, they will all fester inside us rather than between us and the person who hurt us, which is more healthy.
Right. Oh gosh, I've got a bazillion things and we've got 5 minutes. So I'm going to move right to the end. I had this, I wanted to actually talk about, we don't really have time for it, but I was going to have us talk about our fur friends or our animal friends. You actually, for those of you who love animals and feel that animals can be your friends, and some of my best friends in the world have been animals who have shared their lives with me. But you talk in here about that, and there's one section called "The Work of the World," which is on page 125, and it's so beautiful. And
oh, thank you.
It's so
and
great.
it's really, I mean, let me share one thing from that, and because it is about my life of 3 dogs that I've had in my life who have been my teachers. But let me share that at the end I talk about this beautiful myth or story from the Lenape tribe in Delaware, a Native American tribe in Delaware. And in this story, there's a young boy. He finds a stray dog, takes him in and is just, they're pals. And then the young boy, who happens to be, I think, the son of the chief, but he gets sick. And nobody, not the medicine man, nobody can figure out what's wrong with him. And the dog, whose name is Witissa, takes when nobody can figure out what's wrong with him, he takes the ailing boy out into the woods and turns the boy into a dog. And the two of them play and run and go for however long. And when the boy as a dog becomes well, Witissa turns him back into a boy. And he says, "You have taken care of me. I will be your pal for life too." And I just love that story, because I think every time my dog, throws her ball at me and I stop and go play with her, I become a dog for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I come back and I'm a better person.
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's just kind of skip to the end, because I really want you to read a poem or two and anything else like that. I just want to say before we get to the very, very end, again, I think this is a beautiful book for people to read. Let me hold up the real one. Because it's not only, you make the distinction here, this is not just about a friendship between you and me, but it's also a friendship with myself and with life. The bond and the connection we have with life. And I think that's so beautiful. I think it really, Mark, you really did such a beautiful job in connecting all of those dots together. And I really hope people will read it. I also want to just tell people, remind them that they can go to marknepo.com, because you've got really cool stuff on your website and ways to get more Mark, which we all want, more Mark. And I also want to thank Banyan Books again. What an incredible store, both the physical store and the online store, and they support authors so well. And so it's such a privilege to support them. And one other thing about the book, by the way, guys, don't sleep on the notes. Usually in books, you kind of pass by the notes and stuff. Mark hides Easter eggs in the notes. He puts really interesting things in there. And some of the things he puts in there, obviously doesn't fit this part, but they're interesting. And sometimes I read them and I go down rabbit holes of the things that he says. So,
oh, thank you.
Even your notes are interesting.
Oh, thank you.
So in the last minute or so, Mark, I'd love for you to just talk about what you hope people take away with the book and read a poem.
Sure. You know,
so many beautiful poems.
thank you so much, Joel and Banyan Books. And you know, I just feel so close to this notion of friendship. And I think that you know, the Dalai Lama has said that kindness is his religion. And I think if I had to say something was my religion, I would say friendship. Um, there's nothing that's really more important to me. And so I really hope that this book will help open and deepen the gifts and challenges of friendship where you can explore them in your life and with a friend. Well, let me share this poem that's in the book on page 146. It's called "For Those Who Wouldn't Let Me Vanish." At first, we work to find a mirror, then to be a mirror. And like a mirror, a true friend will not judge, but only show us who we are. Deep friends wait to show their worth when we fall down. They listen, bandage, and check if things are healing. As we face what is only ours to face, those who love us befriend us like the moon, always there, even when out of view. In time, a friend is a galaxy to drift in, offering winds that unfurl what we're afraid to show the world, but which friends know we can't live without. We have been all this to each other and more. We have knit a rope of truth that can hoist a life out of its ditch. I owe you everything, the way a star owes its light to the vastness that holds it.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyan Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyan Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyan.com.